Welcome to the Movie Business Podcast, picking up where Movie Business Book left off. I'm Jason Squire, hosting a wide range of industry talent and executives to answer fundamental questions about the business today. Here we go. And the secrets of TOONSTAR will be covered with John ATTANASIO, CEO, and LUISA HUANG, COO, co-founders of TOONSTAR, an animated story studio building content for social media platforms such as YouTube and Snap, which is also an investor. Their community-driven animated series include The Gimmicks, Space Junk, House of Chico, and franchises like Stephen and Parker with influencer Parker James. As former Warner Brothers and Disney executives, John and Luisa are driving innovation in online digital content creation. Welcome, Luisa and John.
Hi.
Hello.
How you guys doing?
Good.
Good. Very good. Thanks for having us.
Oh,
great.
It's my pleasure, and welcome. So the key opening question is, what are the secrets of TOONSTAR?
Secrets.
Wow.
Uh-oh.
We're jumping right in, aren't we?
That's a very big question.
Yeah.
Gonna buy us dinner first?
Yes. No, that's a great question.
Go ahead.
You want me to go? Okay.
Do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very basic idea, but I do think this is part of the secret is that we make things and we do things. And I know, like, I say that and it's like, wow, like that's like, what kind of secret is that? But it is something where I think when you look at the sort of the state of the industry, when you talk to people about what's going on today, you get a range of things from like transition, disruption, existential crisis to just straight out, flat out broken. And I think all those things, what people are saying is that the traditional sort of legacy way of doing things isn't working, and isn't working meaning that things aren't getting made, original stories aren't being told, and there are a lot of great creators and storytellers out there that can't get things produced anymore. That is part of what we're trying to address. That's a core mission of TOONSTAR, is to really unlock storytelling for a new generation of storyteller. Create original animated IP at a time when I think the industry is really, there is this sort of like prequel, sequel, reboot, remake fatigue that's happening, and that's a bit of an issue on the audience side. And so I think you got to make, you got to tell stories.
Well, can I ask, please, to dive a little deeper, and maybe we will unfold some other secrets. For the uninitiated, what's the uniqueness of TOONSTAR?
Yeah, so part of our uniqueness is that our production pipeline is distinct in that our production pipeline has like facilitative AI that's built throughout the ecosystem, right? So we do use a combination of generative AI and machine learning as part of our production pipeline. And that really, really enables us to be able to, do a few things. It's like, it lowers the cost to be able to output content. And then, but I think really more importantly is the speed, right? Like our worldview when it comes to content distribution, or when it comes to, creating new original IP, is that IP needs to be distributed and it needs to reach audiences in places in which they currently are consuming content. And for our core audience, which is young millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they are largely on social media, and more specifically on YouTube. And the importance of being able to go out to market quickly and be able to, execute the formats in which they're used to consuming content is also critically important. And our AI facilitated engines really help us do that.
And also, by the way, there's a great episode on this podcast presented by Rachel Joy Victor about generative AI to provide some background about what we're discussing. John and Luisa, let's turn to a typical product and expression. How does it originate? How does it get on your platform? How do customers find it? What do they pay? Just a typical sort of path of a given expression.
Yeah, so we can take, I think a good example is like, you mentioned it, is Stephen and Parker. So that's one of our breakout hits on YouTube. And the way it works, and to Luisa's point about sort of what's core to how we operate, our studio is part tech, part creative, and so we launch, we call ourselves a digital first animation studio, meaning that we're launching animated IP on digital platforms such as YouTube, such as Snapchat, social media. And then we're using frontier technology such as machine learning, such as generative AI, to really, empower storytellers and bring these original character worlds to life. And so that's what TOONSTAR does. And the way that works in terms of finding the IP is one that, we're launching these characters and stories on platforms where younger audiences are currently, right? If you look at sort of the, I think the latest stat is the biggest streamer in the world isn't Netflix. The biggest streamer in the world is actually YouTube. When you understand that, you're like, oh, okay, that's where Gen Z, Gen Alpha, a lot of millennials, that's where they're currently consuming content, interacting with characters. And so in the case of Stephen and Parker, we partnered with, his name's Parker James, who's he's a well-known digital creator. He's got, he was close to 10 million subscribers on TikTok. Really big following, and we partnered with him to create this animated world. So as far as where you find it and how audiences find it, a lot of it sort of starts with his existing fan base or the users that, when you think about a platform like TikTok, that, there are a lot of, I don't know off the top of my head their daily actives, but I know their daily actives is a huge number. And so you're talking, that's in the million, tens of, million. And so you're looking at that as a starting point, and that's a great, way to expose a new idea to an audience that, in the case of Stephen and Parker, they already knew and loved and had a relationship with Parker James, not in the sense of an animated series, but they already knew and loved him as a digital creator. So that's a great springboard. And then we introduced, the animated series to that audience. And in his case, we did sort of this pilot season to test and, see if they liked the concept. They absolutely loved it. And then from there, we moved it from TikTok to YouTube. And we launched the channel on YouTube. And within about a year's time frame, it went from a brand new channel to, now the channel, I think it's got over 7 million.
Actually 8.
Yeah, so it's got over, and these are pretty incredible numbers. So when you talk about
wow.
Yeah, in the space of a year now, it's got over 8 million subs. The series gets over 30 million weekly viewers, and it's in 5 different languages. So it's and now it's a bona fide animated hit. It's a global hit.
Wait a second, you guys, congratulations. Come on.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Let's turn to the business model. Is there a hypothetical young person knows about Stephen and Parker and starts watching more episodes online on YouTube? What's the transaction? Is there a cost for the viewer? How does the business model work?
Sure. So no. So as a viewer, you experience it on YouTube just like you would any other YouTube show. Now it is, there are ads that run on YouTube. So the business model is that there is ad-supported revenue streams from there. And then just like with any other IP, once you build a community on YouTube or any other social platforms, then you start building that fandom and you build the stickiness and wanting to consume more experiences and more other types of stories or products from that particular IP. And so you take Stephen and Parker, for example, once it built up that audience and the fandom, it made sense for us to extend it into other categories. And so we actually have a graphic novel series. So Random House actually approached us and said, this is the perfect middle grade property, and we want to be able to do a multi-book series deal. And so that's the next thing that's happening is now it's going to be, in books, and there's going to be multiple graphic novels that come from Stephen and Parker. And now people are going to be able to purchase books. There's going to be a merch program that accompanies it. So you're going to be able to find it in the Walmart and Targets of the world. So that's really I guess the business model, quite frankly, isn't that different than, when you think about a Disney business model, right? It's about distribution, finding fandom, and then being able to move into multiple categories that then also support the business model.
Wow, that's great. And it's also a good example of brand extension. And no doubt you'll be heading into other media to push the brands that you're establishing.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why we like to talk about, Stephen and Parker as sort of the blueprint or the poster child for what the mission of TOONSTAR is, because, back to your sort of first question about part of the secret sauce is like, we just feel like that this is a great example of the power of the digital first approach. And we can, with a digital first approach, build, significant global audience. And put that in context, like 30 million weekly viewers, that is 10x think of the biggest hit on a network. That viewership is 10x the biggest animated hit today on any network. And so that, that's a pretty amazing stat in terms of audience reach. And to us, like, that is the potential and the power of the digital first approach. But and we see it as a springboard, because to what you just said is like, that's where you start. You can build an audience, build a large and highly engaged audience. But from there, then you can extend into publishing, which is what we're doing with books. With Stephen and Parker on YouTube, when you have an audience that size, we've been approached by a number of streamers that are interested in, sort of doing like a longer form series on their platform. And that is, potentially something on the roadmap as well. And I would see that as kind of an extension of the IP. So you can then if the IP does work with the audiences, then you can extend into different mediums and formats.
And so you're not considering something like a subscription model, but let me ask, in terms of revenue, with the global reach of the big numbers, the impressive numbers that you mentioned, is there advertising revenue that you participate in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So off of the
Goody.
YouTube channel, there's advertising revenue that we share.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, there you are. That's, I think, a crucial part of the business model.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and brand. I think we mentioned that too. And brand. So ad revenue is a big part of their business model. Brand sponsorships, that's another part of it. And then you start to expand commercialization. Again, we're fortunate enough that it's now going into publishing, but now you got a graphic novel series that's coming. So that's another form of monetization. And then, when I mentioned this possibly ends up on a streamer, it's not that we're going to have a subscription model. It's just that, the idea is that a streamer is basically licensing the content from us, and it would end up on their platform, but that is yet another revenue stream for the IP.
Yep.
Right. Well, it's fascinating how you're growing these original IPs from new directions of talent into a production pipeline, which you then distribute in the ways that you've just described. It really is sort of cutting edge, guys. Good for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I wanted to head into the future. What is your prognosis for the business?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Go for it.
Sorry, I'll go first. So there's probably some bias because our thesis around building what we'll call building a new generation of animated IP. And I think, we've been, some people have called us like a kind of like a modern day Hanna-Barbera, which when we first heard, we're like, oh, interesting. And then we kind of dug into it more and we're like, whoa, there are actually a lot of like really uncanny parallels to sort of what Hanna-Barbera was doing in the 60s and 70s. And compared to what we're doing today. And a lot of that is sort of driven by these sort of macro industry shifts. And I think one of those is distribution disruption. And that's been happening for the past 15 plus years. It really started with like YouTube and social media, which is, I guess close to 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So distribution really with YouTube, social media has been disrupted for 15 plus years. We think that's going to continue, and that really opens up this digital first approach that we employ. The other thing that's been happening is consumer preferences have clearly been changing, especially with, when you look at like Gen Z and Gen Alpha consumers. There's just a study, I think it was a Harris Poll study, that said that Gen Z and basically younger consumers, 3 out of 4 of them are basically have the mentioned franchise fatigue. And so they're actually looking for original stories versus this sort of steady diet of like, prequel, sequel, reboot. And they're also looking for stories that come from what they would consider their peers, which we kind of read as like, and that makes sense to us. It's like, well, what is their franchise, their version of these franchises that we grew up with, sort of being children of Saturday morning cartoons. And I think they're looking for their sort of like this, it's called the creator economy. They're looking for other creators in the creator economy who are their peers to create these original stories. And the same thing applies. I think that study said 3 out of 4 of the younger audiences are looking for that original peer-created content. And so that's another trend. And then I think the third trend that you're seeing now is production is being disrupted. And that's really being driven by a lot of these, these are things that we've been building ourselves for the past, we've been around for like 9+ years. But these are a lot of production tech that we've built, and things that are basically speeding up the production process, bringing efficiencies to the production process, and also bringing scale to production process that previously was only accessible to the big legacy studios. And and we come from that world, like you mentioned, and so we're pretty familiar with it. But these are production capabilities that have been sort of like reserved to those producers. And really what's happening now is they're being democratized. And now indie creators, people from the creator economy, they can now take this tech and tools, and they can produce same studio quality type output, and they can do it much faster and much more cost effectively. And I think that's sort of the third part of the equation that's happening now. And all that to say is that we think the future is you're gonna see a lot more of probably independent studios. You're gonna see a lot more creators that are going to be able to make things that are studio quality, and they can go out and get their own audiences. They can monetize, and they don't necessarily have to go through the traditional gatekeeper economy. And I think that for us, I think that's part of what we see the future. And again, we got a little bit of bias, but I think we do see that as the future.
Yeah, this is really inspiring, because what you've just described is filling a space, a new space in the entertainment horizon, and creating new IP, building IP and forms of distribution which will be user-friendly, and as you just described, cutting out the traditional arms of distribution. It's quite remarkable to have the courage to not only develop the new product, but develop new forms of reaching the audience. The possibilities are endless. And you guys have described a remarkable area in TOONSTAR. Good for you guys.
Thank you.
And so at this point, let me thank you guys for being guests on the Movie Business Podcast and letting us know about this refreshing new space within entertainment. Thanks again for joining us on the Movie Business Podcast. Thank you.
No, thanks for having us. It's great.